omiro sto Hololens. Kalos orizo episis, osus apu asas, mas paracoliθite diadictiaca. I ekthesi parousiasi tis apikonisis tis Samothrakis, ke tu iru ton megalon theon, Japano apo dio hiliadis chronia. Ston anglico titlo tis ekthesis, I lexi imagining, ekphrasi tin skesi anamesa stin icona, image, ke stin fantasia, imagination, ke tu na vriskese mesa in, se enan sechoristo topo. O lexis ikazondas ikonizondas, echun stocho na ekphrasun tin idia idea. Ime megalimas timi, pu o Dimitris matsas, ipitimos ephoros, tis thekatis enatis ephorias pro historikon, ke klassikon archaeotiton, nin ephorias rodopis ke evru, thamas milisi opopse, yati canis, then norisi, calithera, apotonidio, tin historia, tin archaeologia, totopio, ke tus anthropus, tis Samothrakis. Toras thasas miliso sta Anglica. I am Bonna Westcoat, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here tonight to a very special lecture related to the exhibition Imaging and Imagining Samothrace, From Homer to the Hololens. I also welcome those of you who are joining us online. Our speaker this evening, Dimitri Matzis, Ephor Emeritus of the 19th Ephoria of Prehistoric and Classical Antiquities, now the Ephorias of Rhodope and Evros, has over his career transformed our understanding of the island of Samothrace. He is also responsible for preserving much of its tangible and intangible cultural heritage that we enjoy today. A prehistoric archaeologist by training, Dimitris Matzis' work at Mikrou Vouni documented for the first time the earliest human activity on the island in the early late Neolithic, and the presence of Minoan seals and sealings that proved that Minoan seafaring activity reached much further north than previously anticipated. He documented many and excavated several Thracian early Iron Age settlements, and he also expanded our knowledge of ancient worship on the island in the classical period through the excavations at Mandal Panagia, where there is a sanctuary of Bendis Artemis, and a survey at Kerasuda, an area sacred to the Great Mother. Also an anthropologist, he, like Nikolaos Fardi and Ion Dragoumis and Spyros Meletzis, recognized the special character of the Samothracians, their closeness to the land, to their animals, and to each other. Astute to the rapidly changing culture during the 1980s, Dimitris Matzis recorded interviews and photographed islanders engaged in traditional occupations. His photographs offer a later 20th century complement to those of Meletzis' mid-century portraits of island life, but with less heroism and more sympathy. In scenes of social gatherings, vernacular architecture, and traditional occupations, he captures the inevitable contrast between tradition and modernity. He also sought to record and protect the remains of early industrial architecture. You're seeing a glimpse of some here on the screen, which included several water wheels and olive oil processing factories. He also worked to protect the 19th and early 20th century capital village of Horab, which is now officially designated a traditional village. As the American team, it was our very good fortune to work under his direction when he served as proestamenos of the island and then as Ephor from 1983 to 2014. When he retired from the service in 2014, we were honored that he became a leading member of our team. In 2022, he directed the very important field survey conducted in the land between the sanctuary and the ancient city wall, which has shed important light on the interaction between the city and the sanctuary, and on the afterlife of the area from the Byzantine period to the present. He is currently the principal investigator of our collaborative project, the Samothrace LIDAR project, which is grounded in the first survey work he did on the island in the 1980s. Some of our first results are on view in the exhibition, Imaging and Imagining Samothrace. He was also very involved in the reinstallation of the Archaeological Museum of Samothrace, which reopened in July of 2024 and now includes important material from across the island and through all periods. His curatorial work was not finished with that, however, for in many ways he helped us in shaping the direction of the exhibition that we have here on view at the American School. He guided us to the work of Spyros Meletzis, and he shared his own photographic work, which is also on exhibit in the Archaeological Museum of Komotini. After the lecture, you'll have an opportunity to visit the exhibition and see this work in person, for the gallery will remain open until 9:30 this evening. Now, I deeply admire Dimitri Massis's commitment to whole island archaeology and his appreciation of the long arc that creates the past and ties it to the present. But most of all, I have enjoyed and treasured his friendship and his generosity for many years. Please join me in welcoming him. Please speak about seeing Samothrace. Dimitri.
Good evening. It is a great honor for me to be part of the exhibition Imaging Samothrace from Homer to the Hololens. I would like to thank Bona Westcote for inviting me tonight and for her very kind words. As an archaeologist of the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and the 19th F48 of Prehistoric and Classical Antiquities, I have worked on the island since 1980, and I have continued working after my retirement in 2014. Since 2018, I am a member of the American Excavation Samothrace, and I have the chance to combine my experience and knowledge with new projects within and outside the Sanctuary of the Great Gods, the last of which is the Samothrace LiDAR project. Thus, I became a link in a chain of archaeologists and architects who worked on the island since the first half and especially the last quarter of the 19th century. During this period, photography has offered a way to imagine Samothrace that moves beyond maps, drawings, and written descriptions to focus our vision more sharply on the past and present of the island and its people. Alexander Conche and his team developed a new way of visualizing and communicating archaeological evidence. Burger's photographs record foundations, trenches, and the process and progress of excavation. In Burger's views, nature and architecture are entwined. Burger's photographs often include people, like an Austrian sailor, a Samothracian workman, a boy from the island, or depict the landscape and the anthropogenic environment, especially of the village of Chora. Local workmen appear in the French-Czechoslovak excavation of the theater in the Sanctuary of the Great Gods. The next two phases of excavations in the sanctuary, 1938-2012, were conducted by the Institute of Fine Arts, New York University, under Carl Lehmann and James Macready. Excavation included work in the Anactoron, the Rotunda of Arsinoe, the Hieron, the Hall of Choral Dancers, the Stoa, the Eastern Hill, the Propylon of Ptolemy, and other monuments of the sanctuary. Construction of the major hall, Hall A of the museum, was begun in 1939 and was completed in 1948. In the mid-1950s, the Xenia Hotel was constructed north of the museum. Both buildings were designed by Stuart Shaw, a Lehmann's architect in the excavations. In 1948, photographer Spyros Meletzis created a rich essay of the island's natural environment, its traces of antiquity and its people. These photos, now in the photographic archive of the Ephorate of Evros, were printed by Meletzis himself in 1986 from negatives preserved in the archive of the photographer. A selection of 12 photos were included in the calendar of 1987, published by the Cultural Association of Samothrace and edited by Meletzis himself. Meletzis photographed shepherds appearing as confident and stalwart as the sky and rocky landscape against which are set. He also photographed village and family life in Chora and captured the interface between the mountains and the sea. Meletzis photographed the pebbly shore, which provided an easy thoroughfare of communication and herding, and Kamaryotissa, then the only port of the island. While Stuart Shaw recorded the Samothracian landscape and monuments, he chiefly focused on people and occasions, arrivals and departures from the island, feasting and dancing, riding mules to Chora, and constructing the Archaeological Museum of Samothrace. His photographs capture liveliness and conviviality. When I arrived on Samothrace, I met James Macready, who directed the excavations of the Institute of Fine Arts, New York University, in the Sanctuary of the Great Gods. Macready, while on Samothrace, lived in a house designed by the famous Greek architect Pavlos Mylonas, on the top of a small hill near the coast, west of the village of Paleopolis. In 1981, I first visited the Tel settlement site at Mikrou, Vouni. Where the Greek army in mid-1970s had opened an extensive defensive trench and constructed 2 pillboxes using stones from the walls of the settlement. In the beginning, it was decided to excavate a deep sounding in order to establish the cultural sequence of the site, which later proved to start from late Middle Neolithic and to conclude in the late Middle Bronze Age. In 1983, we found the first Minoan document, a clay roundel with 4 impressions from the same seal, depicting the first part of the Minoan libation or archanes formula. In later seasons, 3 more clay documents bearing the same theme would be discovered, suggesting a probable sacral owner or institution behind the activities of the Minoan elites. The old school house of Paleopolis became our headquarters. At bottom center, James Macready and Phyllis Lehman visiting the excavation. In 1990, the first wind turbines visible from the site were installed on the island, and our Trojan neighbor, Manfred Korfmann, visited the site. The Samothrace Archaeological Survey, conducted from 1985 to 1987, was an intensive diachronic survey of the southwest arable part of the island, in which 2,706 field units, measuring in sum 14 square kilometers, were surveyed. The surface material established a chronological horizon spanning the last quarter of the 6th century BCE through the 14th, 15th century CE, apart from the earlier Mikrou Vouni sequence, and 2 field units with possible final Neolithic material. The most notable feature of the landscape in this region is the substantial number of churches or church ruins, preserving many architectural blocks from the sanctuary of the great gods. These include 2 necking drums from the porch of the hall of choral dances, and a round base with records of initiates used in these 3 cases as high altar. Later archaeological survey took the form of targeted visits to sites and intra-site surveys and collections, including the settlement of Fonias, an ancient limestone quarry, and a possible early Iron Age rock sanctuary. During this survey, modern architectural features were also recorded as the typical Samothracian country house. A very important discovery of the Samothrace Archaeological Survey was the open-air sanctuary dedicated to the Great Mother in the guise of the Mother of the Mountains, Mitir. In combination with the archaeological survey, two ethno-archaeological surveys of the living past were conducted, one of the traditional crafts and occupations, the other concerned the traditional water management, focusing on water mills and olive oil mills. The former concerned boat building, farming. You see some of the threshing sledges surviving in 1980s, animal husbandry, beekeeping, fishing, sea transport. The Samothracian watermill is a one-story building, and its machinery uses a horizontal water wheel mounted on the lower end of an axle, which passes through the lower millstone and is attached to the upper millstone. The latter revolves while the lower millstone remains stationary. The water tower was rectangular outside with a stepped facade. The olive oil mills are oblong buildings with a linear extended layout of the rooms. They housed the oil mill, which is grinding stones, the press, and the pithoi for storing the oil. The vertically mounted overshot and pitchback water wheels were rotated by water falling onto the paddles. Along with the water wheel, after 1925, turbines were used. In the area of Βρυχός Ελλάδα Γιαλόμαντρα, archaeological survey and excavation brought to light an early Iron Age settlement and a fortification enclosure wall on the top of a hill to the west of the modern village of Chora. In this area, a cemetery of megalithic tombs had been located already in the early 20th century. The population of Samothrace during early Iron Age was of Thracian origin. Archaeological survey verified the existence of contemporary sites at elevations between 400 and 600 meters along an arc extending from the site of Krimiotissa southeast to Βρυχός northwest. In this area, an open-air sanctuary of Bendis Artemis formed the interface between Thracians and Greeks. The latter settled the island probably from the 7th century and certainly from the early 6th century BCE. The Greeks settled the northwest coast of the island, where the ancient city was enclosed by an impressive fortification. The site was chosen much later in 15th century by the Genoese lords of the island to build a fort comprising a moat, an enclosure wall, and 3 towers. The sanctuary of the great gods, located very close to the western wall of the ancient city, provided evidence of cult activity since 7th century BC, but monumental architecture came in the end of the 5th century or the beginning of the 4th century BC. The American excavation Samothrace, in their 3rd period, are directed since 2012 by Bona Westcote, who first came to the island 3 years earlier than me. My work at the sanctuary as an archaeologist of the local F48 concerned the site management and especially its eastern region and the most vulnerable to storms part of it, the central stream. The declining old village of Paleopolis near the sanctuary formed until the end of the 20th century a dispersed settlement with dwellings similar to those depicted on the slide. However, touristic activity is starting to form a significant sector of the economy of the villagers, sometimes with negative effects to the anthropogenic and natural environment. 2 remarkable stone buildings in the settlement of Paleopolis, the former Xenia Hotel and the museum, were designed by Stuart Shaw, as already told. The new exhibition of the museum houses finds from the ancient city and the sanctuary, but also from recent archaeological work on the island outside the sanctuary and the ancient city. Further east, along the north coast of the island, lies the river Fonias. At whose eastern mouth stands the medieval tower you see now. Before and after its collapse, following the storm in 2017. Along the eastern and western banks of the river, the substantial remains of a settlement dating from the Archaic through the post-Byzantine period are visible. A search for refuge inland and the move of the population to Hora must have been their response to unsettled times, The exact circumstances and date of this movement is unknown, but it should have happened after the 10th century CE. A Genoese fortress dating to 1431-1433 stands at the northeast end of the settlement. From that period until the early 20th century, Hora was to remain the only permanent settlement of the island, built between the early Iron Age fortification at Vrυχos and the Genoese fortress. Hora has retained its singular character in spite of the often vulgar modernized construction and the actual disappearance of the peasant pastoral Aitsenio house, which constitutes one of the most primitive forms of a habitation unit in the Mediterranean. However, since the late 19th century, houses with urban features began to appear, along with more complex buildings and constructions which had a specific use. The monumental Church of the Dormition of the Virgin is in the center of the settlement, which is dispersed with much smaller churches. One of them is devoted to Aios Eupplus, the saint giving a fair voyage, perhaps reminiscent of the benefit known to have come from initiation at the sanctuary of the great gods. The monastery of Christos had monks until at least 1756. Its single-aisled late Byzantine 14th century Catholicon is perhaps the most important standing medieval monument on Samothrace. The monastery of Aios Athanasius could date since Middle Byzantine period. Both monasteries became dependencies of Moni Iviron on Mount Athos in 1771. Samothrace integrates the divine forces of sea, earth, and sky, which in antiquity were associated with the great gods, capturing the island's eternal essence. As you saw, my photographic lens is biased toward the past, either working as an archaeologist or living among the Samothracians, to whom this presentation is devoted as a gift in return. Thank you.
Will you take questions?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, Dimitri, thank you so much for an exquisitely beautiful presentation and rich in imagery as in every stage. I would like to, again, congratulate you for all of the work that you've done on the island. And I would like to be selfishly ask the first question, which is, if you wouldn't mind, to say what was to you the most exciting discovery or experience you had on Samothrace?
Probably the Minoan presence, the Minoan documents connecting the island with the palace of Knossos, as it is already established, because of the similarities of the sealing practices. But I think archaeological work on the island offered a lot of good and spectacular moments.
Well, I would agree that the Minoan connection, which really transformed our understanding of seafaring in that period and connection, was pretty spectacular. I agree.
I imagine that future work at Mikrou Vouni will recover much more documentation in order to be more accurate in our crisis about the kind of the administration, the Minoan administration represented on the island, and the other Minoan aspects of everyday life, like the weaving. We found many loom weights of the Minoan type, which are very important.
Yes, and can I just ask, were those found in your sondage, your 4-meter square sondage, or were they found in the settlement area?
In the settlement area, but everywhere there is this aspect of behavior.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now I'd be happy to open to the audience for questions or thoughts from the Neolithic to the present.
Thank you so much for your really interesting talk, getting to see Samothrace from the 1980s until now. How would you describe how the livelihood and lifestyle on Samothrace has changed since you started working there in the present? And how do you see it moving forward into the future?
Yes, when I first lived with the people of the island, in 1980s, this decade, Samothracians were a bit restricted toward me because I was an official representative of the service, imposing restrictions to their properties sometimes, and they were very angry about the policy of the ministry concerning the traditional settlement of Hora. But later they became more friendly to me. But the islanders were affected very fast in next decade and in the beginning of the 21st century by the new wave of life, and mainly from the impact of tourism. Although tourism steps on the island as not as fast as in the Cyclades. I think I helped somehow, at least some part of the population, to understand the meaning and the importance of their past.
Thank you.
Hi. Do you think there's a Minoan sanctuary in the island yet to be discovered?
Yes, yes. I think the most impressive aspect of the high areas, the mountain areas, is the great number of the Thracian settlements, and settlements also of later periods, of the medieval periods as well. And it is almost certain that we'll find more evidence afterwards. Of course, what is seen from the island's trajectory so far is that the periods of inside looking, the loneliness of the island was connected more with the mountain, which is an independent and separate unit of the island's culture. And there is a very recent book published by municipality of Samothrace by a professor, a late professor of University of Salonika, who studied the local idiom. And this book is concerned with the Pimenica, the shepherd's world, and is a mirror of the life of the island in times of self-dependence.
Thank you.
We do have one question online, and it is from Jim Cleary, who writes, "Greetings from London. Thank you for this fascinating talk and for the fine exhibition which I visited last week. I'm now inspired to visit Samothrace, but I hear your concerns about the impact of tourism. What would you recommend I do?"
This is a difficult answer. One possible answer is the better organization of the municipality of the island in order to react immediately to threats, like the last movement by the mayor of Samothrace for protecting Hora, which is threatened in the last years with construction.
But you would agree it's still both desirable and possible to visit the island and ecologically and respectfully enjoy it. Yeah. Okay. I wonder, Dimitri, you went very quickly through the slides of the museum, but this is an extraordinary accomplishment, and if the audience is interested, if you wouldn't mind just showing the galleries again, that you, you had wonderful images, and I don't know how many of you have been to the new installation which opened in July of 2024, but It's a complete, it's the same building, but a complete rethinking of the exhibits, which Dimitri and the team from Evros and Rhodope did. So, would you mind saying a few words?
Hall A is devoted to the historical reconstructions of the major monuments of the sanctuary, made by Karl Lehmann in 1950s. Hall B presents exhibits mostly from the necropolises of the island, the south and north necropolis, but also presents a selection of coins, both from the island and of different towns found on Samothrace. Hall C houses a new reconstruction, partial reconstruction of the facade of the dedication of Philip and Alexander, Philip III and Alexander IV, and also presents the eastern hill, including the rotunda of Arsinoe. The essence of the exhibition in halls C and D is to present, to represent the visitors and the initiant way through the site, from the entrance to the cult buildings in the central ravine. In the courtyard, there is an exhibition of 32 epigraphic documents, mostly from the sanctuary of the great gods, but some of them coming also from the ancient city, and found inscriptions found in other places of the island. The inscriptions are divided in four categories: the records of initiates, Miste and Theoroi, dedicatory inscriptions, decrees, and funerary inscriptions. Hall D houses the reconstruction of the southeast corner of the hall of choral dances, and you see the preserved parts from the frieze of this building, and a column from the porch. The necking drum you see on the top of the column is the same as the necking drums I've shown to you in a slide from the survey. We located two churches having as high altar a necking drum from the porch of the Hall of Choral Dancers. Also, Hall D houses finds from the Nike monument and dedications, and finds from the inscribed sherds found in the sanctuary of the great gods, both in the Thracian language and the Greek language. And Holi is a hall dedicated to the island outside the sanctuary and the ancient city. Finds from the excavation at Mikrou are exhibited in the first case. Finds from Βρυχός, from the open-air sanctuaries at Mandal Panagia and Kerasuda, the sanctuaries dedicated to Bendis Artemis and Mother of the Mountains, and finds from the Byzantine period are exhibited also, and also finds from Hora, which means often the villagers incorporated in their walls blocks from the sanctuary. And a selection of these blocks is exhibited in Hall E. This is a very general description of the new exhibition of the museum.
Well, thank you, and it should entice everyone to see it who has not yet been. Can I ask if there are any other questions that you'd like to ask at this time? All right, well then I would like to thank Dimitri Matzis for really a panoply view of the island, and invite you all both to come down and share a glass of wine at a reception, or also come over to the exhibition, Imaging and Imagining Samothrace, which is open especially for all of you. Thank you very much.